The term biodiversity is a combination of two words, bio meaning life and diversity meaning variety. Thus, biodiversity refers to the variety of different living organisms found on Earth that are interrelated and interacting with one another in their ecosystem or habitat. It is also defined as the difference between living organisms, including diversity within species, among species, ecosystems from all sources including marine, terrestrial, and aquatic ecosystems, as well as the ecological complexes in which they belong. Having said that, biodiversity ensures that each organism has its own niche in the ecosystem. Every species, no matter how small, has a specific role to play in the ecosystem, and each role that a species plays has an impact on the entire bio-network. The combination of the roles of the various organisms allows the ecosystem to prevent and recover from a wide range of adversities. While there may be survival of the fittest within a given species, each species relies on the services provided by other species to ensure survival. Nowadays, as we face a global crisis which is climate change, one of the factors that affects our biodiversity. Due to human consumption and negligence, our biodiversity is currently in jeopardy and is dealing with various threats that could lead to endangerment and extinction of species. According to the National Geographic, in the past 100 years, biodiversity around the world has decreased dramatically. Many species have gone extinct. Even though extinction is a natural process, as some species naturally die out while new species evolve, human activity has changed the natural processes of extinction and evolution. Scientists estimate that species are dying out at hundreds of times the natural rate, and the cause of this is human activities such as pollution, habitat loss, overexploitation, and climate change, which is also linked to human activity, is also a factor. While, according to the latest Living Planet report by World Wide Fund for Nature, there has been a 69% decline in the wildlife populations of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish across the globe in the last 50 years. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, we are known as one of the world's 18 mega biodiverse countries, containing two-thirds of the planet's biodiversity and between 70% and 80% of the plant and animal species. However, the increasing human activity has also pushed our wildlife to the brink of extinction. As a result, we are also recognized as the world's biodiversity hotspot with at least 700 threatened species, making it one of the top global conservation areas. The Philippines has at least 3,214 species, 121 of which are endemic, and 76 of which are threatened. Due to these circumstances, the government is taking actions by implementing laws such as the Republic Act 1947 and the Republic Act 7586. The said acts will provide protection and conservation of the wildlife resources and biodiversity. It also talks about the fines and penalties that a person would receive upon committing illegal acts. However, these laws will be pointless if people will not cooperate. So as citizens of this country, we are obliged to abide by these laws. Protecting and conserving the biodiversity should always be our top priority. As humans, we benefit the most of it because it supports our needs, including food and nutrition security, energy, development of medicines and pharmaceuticals, and fresh water. It also provides economic opportunities and protection from different disasters such as floods, landslide, and many more. With this being said, since we rely the most in our biodiversity and ecosystem, we also have the responsibility to maintain it and preserve it. They say small things lead to big changes, so the changes start with us. By simple practicing of proper waste segregation, the reduce, reuse, recycle method, or supporting locals and eco-friendly products, riding a bike or walking, and spreading awareness through social media, we can already contribute in the preservation of our biodiversity. If we pollute the air, water, and soil that keep us alive and well, and destroy the biodiversity that allows natural systems to function, no amount of money will save us. This is why, as humans, we should not take the gift of nature for granted. Instead, we should take care of it, preserve it, and maintain it so that future generations will follow in our footsteps.
Leprosy, also known as ketong, smallpox, polio, and a lot more diseases has been all but eliminated, or if not, will be completely gone within the next several years. The development of antibiotics has saved countless lives worldwide, while immunizations have shielded hundreds of millions of people from the aforementioned diseases and spared the deaths of tens of millions more. However, many people still lack the necessary information to consider when deciding on their own health in an informed manner. That's why, even in the richest nations, the average life expectancy was significantly below 50 in 1900, with a global average of only 31 years. Life expectancy is currently about 70 years for the majority of the world, with wealthier countries having large populations of people who are over 80. These are notable accomplishments, yet there are still lots of health issues to be solved. Health of society, or public health, is the science and art of preventing disease, prolonging life, and promoting health through the organized effort of the society. An article from Oxford Academics entitled "The Health Society: Importance of the New Policy Proposal" by the EU Commission on Health and Consumer Affairs conceptualized 6 of public health defining characteristics. First, there is a radical shift demographics, a high life and healthy life expectancy, and increasingly aging population. Second, there is an expansive health and medical care system that takes up increasing parts of the GNP, or also known as the gross national product, and of personal income. Third, it has an expanding health market for information, products, and services alongside such as wellness and within the medical system. Fourth, there is an increasing prominence of health in the debate about political and social priorities, about rights and responsibilities. Fifth, there is also increasing importance of health as a major personal goal in life. And lastly, there is a right to health as a key component of modern citizenship. Thus, pioneers in public health nowadays should grasp the idea of merging and taking into consideration the combining of health and society policies. Why? Because it gives enough awareness, not just with the difference between the different systems of health, action and policy, but also to respond to the increasing health inequalities within.
Ecosystems are indeed working perfectly for the society to be healthy. They offer secure access to food, clean air, fresh water, and medications. Additionally, they reduce sickness and maintain the environment. People rely on biodiversity in ways that are not always noticeable or valued in their daily lives. Human health ultimately depends on ecosystem services and goods which are necessary for good human health and prosperous livelihoods, such as the availability of fresh water, food, and fuel sources. If ecological services are no longer sufficient to meet social requirements, the loss of biodiversity may have serious direct effect on human health. Access to a sufficient supply of a variety of healthy foods is a key factor in determining health. Food production is an ecosystem service, and there are multiple degrees of connection between nutrition and biodiversity, including the species in the ecosystem and the genetic diversity within them.
Aside from providing us access to an adequate amount of healthy food supply, biodiversity also plays a role in dealing with cures for different diseases that the society suffers from this time being, which helps in regulation and control of infectious diseases. We could not deny that traditional medicine still has an important part in healthcare, particularly in primary care. According to estimates, 60% of people worldwide utilize traditional medicines, which in some nations are deeply integrated into the public health system. The most widely used form of medication in both conventional and complementary medicine is derived from medicinal plants.
Over the decades, we have experienced great loss in biodiversity around the world, as we put more strain on the environment by utilizing and consuming more resources than ever before. We run the risk of disturbing the balance of ecosystems and eradicating biodiversity. Natural habitat destruction is a significant factor in the loss of biodiversity. Wild plants and animals are losing their habitat in farms, woods, and wetlands. This results in the decrease in the number of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and amphibians worldwide by an average of 69% since 1970. The IPBES Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services also reveals that around 1 million animal and plant species are presently in danger of going extinct, many within the next few decades. Human activities have substantially changed 75% of the land-based ecosystem and 66% of the marine environment. The cultivation of crops and animals currently occupies more than a third of the planet's land area and virtually all of its freshwater resources. Worldwide human population has more than quadrupled since 1970, from 3.7 to 7.6 billion, increasing unevenly among nations and regions, and to name a few. Globally speaking, just by absorbing all these changes in biodiversity, we can say that it is deteriorating dramatically. That concerns the state of biodiversity in the whole world. What about in the Philippines? The Philippines, along with other mega-diverse nations, is home to more than two-thirds of all plant and animal species on Earth. At least 20,000 of the animal species are found only on the island, making the region home to one of the highest densities of wildlife species in the whole globe. However, the Philippines is facing matters regarding biodiversity. Due to destructive resources like fishing activities, habitat modification, alien species invasion, chemical pollution, eutrophication, and global climate change that is prevalent in the Philippines, 42 species of land mammals, 127 species of birds, 24 species of reptiles, and 14 species of amphibians are included in the National List of Vulnerable Faunal Species, which was created in 2004. Also, the country is thought to have lost 2.1% of its forest cover yearly between 2000 and 2005, ranking 6th globally and second fastest in Southeast Asia in terms of deforestation rates. These are few of the many threats to biodiversity in the Philippines, and this is the alarming state of the Philippines in biodiversity.
The year 2020 has been a very devastating year for our global health. The previously unknown virus has spread rapidly around the world, and almost all countries worldwide struggle to suppress the pandemic immediately, which made the situation worse. Many people got infected easily and eventually died. Aside from the COVID-19 itself, global health has been significantly impacted in other causes that may also be the result of the pandemic. One of the results of the pandemic is the closing of business and unemployment. People in different parts of the world have experienced poverty and hunger caused by no source of income, especially nowadays that inflation rate has increased, and it has caused the price of goods to rise. That's why they don't know where they will get money to buy food that causes them to be unhealthy and prone to disease. There are also many cases of those who experience depression and anxiety due to extreme poverty and chaotic environment. Others commit suicide and give up their lives. The pandemic has really affected the mental health of people around the world. On the other side, almost everyone just stayed inside their house so as not to get infected by COVID-19 outside. This in turn resulted in lack of sufficient exercise and being unhealthy. The majority lost their body condition and became thin or gained weight. These days, everything is almost back to normal and people are not able to do what they used to do before the pandemic, just like jogging outside, playing any sports, and other types of exercises. Aside from that, climate change also affected society's health. Climate change is already adversely affecting human health through direct impacts, including health impacts of rising temperatures and extreme weather events, and indirect impacts via ecosystems such as impacts on global food supplies and changes in vector-borne disease transmission. Peoples in other countries are experiencing rising temperatures, flooding, poor air quality, and disruption of water supplies, and more caused by climate change. In the Philippines, in past few weeks, the number of people getting sick has increased, especially coughs and colds. Climate change also has a big impact on the country. In fact, the Philippines is highly vulnerable to impacts of climate change, including sea level rise, increased frequency of extreme weather events, rising temperatures, and extreme rainfall. This is due to its high exposure to natural hazards like cyclones, landslides, floods, droughts, dependence on climate-sensitive natural resources, and vast coastline, where all of its major cities and majority of the population reside. That's why, when it floods, it rises quickly and causes danger to human life, and not only because of the disease caused by bacteria-infested flood like leptospirosis. Elsewhere, people in the Philippines are gradually getting their bodies back in shape because of playing sports and other exercises. COVID keeps surging, but life is returning to normal everywhere you look. In Pratter's article entitled, "When Will the Pandemic Really Be Over?" the author discussed how we can get out of this pandemic. This is said to be when the level of COVID infections around the world is sufficiently reduced. The World Health Organization or WHO sees the declaration of the COVID-19 disease as a public health emergency being lifted this year. The body's technical lead for the coronavirus illness said it on January 11, 2023 in a live question and answer session on social media.
Biodiversity hotspots are areas that are heavily threatened by habitat loss, plant endemism, and other human activities such as development, urbanization, disease, and pollution. A region must meet two strict criteria to qualify as a biodiversity hotspot. It must contain at least 1,500 species of vascular plants which are found nowhere else on Earth, and it must have lost 70% of its primary native vegetation. There are currently 36 areas that qualify as biodiversity hotspots around the world. Their intact habitats cover only 2.5% of the Earth's land surface, but they are home to more than half of the world's plant species, as well as nearly 43% of bird, mammal, reptile, and amphibian species. The Indo-Burma Biodiversity Hotspot, which spans for more than 2 million square kilometers of tropical Asia, is one of the world's most biologically significant areas. It is also one of the most endangered, where only 5% of the hotspot's natural habitat is in relatively good condition. In terms of unique terrestrial and marine plant and animal species per unit area, the Philippines is likely the most biologically diverse country in the world. Furthermore, the country contains more endemic species than some larger megadiversity hotspots. Plant endemism is estimated to be between 45 and 60%. The Philippines is home to 193 threatened, critically endangered, and vulnerable species. The Sierra Madre Corridor has the most protected areas, with 68 total, including national parks, watershed forest reserves, natural monuments, marine reserves, protected landscapes, and seascapes. The Northern Sierra Madre Natural Park is the largest and most important of these because it pioneered the concept of biodiversity corridors and has served as a model for other regions in the Philippines. Not only is the corridor rich in species diversity and endemism, but it is also home to many indigenous people, including the Agtas or Dumagats, Isneg, Ibanags, Ikalahans, Gadangs, Ifugao, Ilongots, and Bugalots or Negritos.
Genetically modified organisms are plants, animals, and/or microbes whose DNA has been altered through genetic engineering. GMOs are modified for a specific purpose, might it be for research, production of crops, or even prevention of diseases. Genetic engineering is the primary method used to modify the traits and characteristics of GMOs. It is a process wherein laboratory-based technology is used to alter the DNA makeup of an organism. This can require altering a single base pair, erasing a section of DNA, or incorporating new DNA. For instance, transferring a gene from one species to an organism from a different species in genetic engineering may result in a desired characteristic. Genetic engineering has been used in research and industry to produce cancer treatments, brewing yeasts, and genetically modified plants and animals, among other things. Some examples of common foods that are actually GMOs are watermelons, bananas, eggplants, carrots, and corn. Before domestication, the species of the aforementioned crops were barely edible. Unlike the modern bananas we have today, which are very easy to eat, 7,000 years ago, bananas once had tough seeds all throughout its interior, and its outside is stocky and hard. Around the 10th century, carrots were cultivated as either white or purple with forked roots and strong flavor, which is very far from the carrots we have at the present, which are large, colorful, and tasty. Modern corn, on the other hand, is now 1,000 times bigger than the ones cultivated in 7000 BCE, which were thought to be as dry as a raw potato and is easier to grow and peel. Genetic engineering is deemed to be beneficial to different fields, including but not limited to agriculture, medicine, and research. Agriculture. Genetic engineering benefits the agriculture industry by increasing crop yields and reducing the cost of production. GMOs less likely need to be treated with pesticides due to their engineered resistance to pests and diseases. Genetic engineering can also be used to extend the shelf life of food, which reduces the need to deplete supplies as well as the cost of production. Furthermore, these crops are modified to have enhanced nutrient composition and food quality. Medicine. In medicine, genetic engineering reduces the need of drug production by paving the way for the creation of GMOs responsible for medical benefits to diseases, considering the world's growing population. Genetic engineering can also enhance the nutrients within the food and create medicinal foods that can be used as vaccines or substitute to other medicines. Research. For research purposes, on the other hand, animals have also been genetically engineered to enhance or increase yield and to develop immunity from diseases. Salmons, for example, have been engineered to grow larger and mature faster, and cattle have been modified to exhibit immunity or resistance to mad cow disease. If genetic engineering demonstrates such benefits, implications and concerns are also present. Genetic engineering poses potential risks and unknown harm to the health of individuals and the environment. Antibiotic resistance. Genes associated with antibiotic resistance in food could have two negative outcomes. First off, when taking antibiotics with meals, eating these items may lessen their ability to combat disease. Genes that cause antibiotic resistance provide enzymes that can break down antibiotics. When an antibiotic and a tomato with an antibiotic-resistant gene are consumed together, the drug may be destroyed in the stomach. Second, the resistance genes may be passed on to infections that affect people or animals, rendering them resistant to antibiotics. Production of new toxins. Toxic chemicals can be produced by a wide variety of organisms. Such substances aid plants in protecting stationary organisms from numerous predators that exist in their surroundings. Plants occasionally have dormant pathways that lead to poisonous compounds. These dormant processes may be activated through genetic engineering, which would also raise the concentrations of harmful chemicals in the plants. This may occur, for instance, if the inserted genes on and off signals were situated on the genome in regions where they could activate the dormant genes. Poisoned wildlife. In a variety of situations, the introduction of foreign genes into plants could have detrimental effects for wildlife as well. For instance, modifying crop plants like rice or tobacco to make plastics or medicines could put mice or deer in jeopardy because they eat crop debris that is left in the fields after harvest. Fish that have been genetically modified to have metal sequestering proteins could be dangerous if fed by other fish or animals like bears, raccoons, or other species. These fish have been proposed as living pollution cleanup devices. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations reports that public acceptability trends vary by country and state of mind at the time of study in Europe and Asia. Depending on people's degree of education and how they define each of these concepts, attitudes about cloning, biotechnology, and genetically modified products vary. Support varies depending on the sort of biotechnology, but it always drops when animals are involved. Furthermore, even if the technology is shared fairly, there are some who would still fight consumable GMOs even with comprehensive testing for safety because of personal or religious convictions. The argument about our ability to play God and the introduction of foreign material into foods from which some refrain for religious reasons are only two examples of the ethical problems with GMOs. Some people feel that messing with nature is inherently evil, while others uphold the moral wrongness of introducing plant DNA into animal or vice versa. Thanks to advances in whole genome sequencing technology, gene cloning and transfer methods, and our understanding of gene expression networks, these challenges are becoming more and more crucial to take into account as the number of GMOs rises. Legislative procedures that govern this research must therefore evolve. Prior to legalizing commercial use of GMOs, governments do risk assessments to understand the possible repercussions of their use, but challenges in assessing the impact of commercial GMO use makes regulation of these organisms difficult.
Wildlife conservation can be classified into two, in situ and ex situ conservation. In situ conservation means the conservation of ecosystems and natural habitats and the maintenance and recovery of viable populations of species in their natural surroundings. In the case of domesticated or cultivated species, in the surroundings where they have developed their distinctive properties. Examples of in situ conservation environments include national park and wildlife sanctuaries.
National parks are protected areas which are maintained by the government. The boundaries of a national park are clearly demarcated, and human activities inside the park such as grazing cattle, timber harvesting, and cultivation are usually prohibited in national parks. Tourists can visit to see the wildlife in their natural habitat. On the other hand, wildlife sanctuaries are relatively bigger than national parks. They may not have clear boundaries so that animals can freely roam around without being restricted to a specific region. Human activities are allowed in these regions provided that they do not interfere with the conservation project. In some places, animal sanctuaries may also refer to lands which are being used to rehabilitate abandoned or sick animals. These sanctuaries are enclosed regions, unlike wildlife sanctuaries, which do not have physical boundaries. Wildlife benefits from in situ conservation in ways such as it conserves the species and its habitat. It conserves the entire ecosystem and not just a particular species. Through in situ conservation, not only does it help the species thrive, but it also supports the habitat in which they prosper. Useful in conserving large populations of a species. Although it does not allow large populations of a species to thrive, it involves the breeding and maintenance of species outside their natural ecosystem, wherein in situ conservation addresses this problem more effectively. Additionally, you can save more than one species at the same time through in situ conservation. It is less disruptive method of conservation. When animals are in their natural habitat, they can evolve naturally and are more sensitive to natural threats. These include their ability to live alongside predators and to easily reciprocate to phenological changes. Those species which are part of ex situ conservation efforts may not have the same abilities to adapt to an environment. They may need a lot of time to recover when they are returned to their natural habitat. It is a cost-efficient conservation method. Governments and conservation bodies aim to utilize cost-efficient methods. Since in situ conservation helps conserve more species, it is considered most cost-efficient.
Moving on, ex situ conservation literally means off-site conservation. It is the process of protecting an endangered species, variety of breed, of plant or animal outside its natural habitat. The degree to which humans control or modify the natural dynamics of the managed population varies widely, and this may include alteration of living environments, reproductive patterns, access to resources, and protection from predation and mortality. Ex situ management can occur within or outside a species' natural geographic range. Zoos, aquariums, and animal shelters are the most common environment for ex situ conservation. Zoos focus on research and studies to better understand the animal species. Many of them also take part in selective breeding programs. Since zoos are a rich resource for humans to understand wildlife, research in zoos supports conservation efforts. Next, aquariums. Aquariums help in protecting marine organisms. The efforts in maintaining aquariums and ensuring that they resonate with the actual environment for the species is difficult. Lastly, animal shelters. Animal shelters are mostly designed to take in animals that have been abandoned. These are still a place for in situ conservations since these animals are usually not in their natural habitat. Donkeys, horses, and several breeds of dogs and cats may not be adapted to the environment they lived in. This is because they have been displaced from their natural habitat. Having that said, ex situ conservation also benefits wildlife in terms of protection, monitoring, and research. Protection from predation and poaching. Animals in ex situ conservation live in very protected environments. The environment may have been artificially constructed to somewhat reflect the natural ecosystem, but it is free of threats like predators and poaching. Easier monitoring of the health of organisms. Ex situ conservation efforts are mostly viable for small populations. These make it easy for monitoring the health of the organisms. If any disease or sickness appears among the animal species, they can be quickly addressed. This is an advantage for animals living in an ex situ conservation environment. In situ conservation efforts are mostly focused on protecting the animal and plant species from predation and poaching. Overall health of the species may be monitored, but individual health may go unmonitored. Animals can be saved in the event of a natural disaster. Natural disasters can easily wipe out important organisms in affected regions. In situ conservation efforts may not be able to easily launch rescue operations, whereas ex situ conservation areas, on the other hand, are better prepared to handle natural disasters. Research to understand an animal or plant species. Ex situ conservation systems are helpful in providing researchers the ability to closely study the animal species. This may be relatively difficult in the other environments where the animals roam freely.
Science, Technology, and Society, or STS, is a course that is teaching people to be conscious of the community needs in order to engage in a technologically oriented economy. It addresses new concerns regarding efficient methods for enhancing students' comprehension of the nature of science. Compared to the traditional textbook-focused classrooms, STS instructions aid students in understanding the nature of scientific concepts and fosters favorable attitudes towards science, science classes, and science teachers. It also pushes teachers to employ more explicit techniques unlike the standard textbook. Also, STS gives the students the opportunity to pick a real-world topic or problem to research. Thus, students develop a fully formed cognitive, emotional, and psychomotor skills from within. Activities that assist the cognitive domain are in the invitational stage when problem with occurrence that occur in daily life emerges. The cognitive learning outcome of the students were then improved by the STS learning methodology. However, using STS has its own negative side. An example of this is that the teachers belief had an impact on how they conducted themselves in the classroom or how they planned their lesson. Their decisions and behaviors will be influenced by their beliefs, which will be taught to their students. STS also uses experimental methodologies that are too straightforward to represent the complexity of classroom activities and students' results. Students are expected to be active during the execution of STS learning technique, both physically and intellectually. The learning strategy of STS stimulates and encourages students to more thoroughly desire understanding of the material learned, their impact on the environment, and to offer students the flexibility to express their thoughts during the learning process. As a result, the cognitive learning outcome of the students were improved by the STS learning methodology, and students feel actively involved in the construction of information that they have acquired. The intentional integration of STS information can also help the students achieve its goals. However, most students, especially female students, spend their middle school years developing a bad attitudes towards science classes, and pupils who adhere to a traditional curriculum don't demonstrate any advantage in science content achievement and make very little progress in STS content achievement. Society values science because it may be used to better living conditions and meet many fundamental human needs. The dynamic aspect of science, which is the ongoing review and evaluation of the body of current knowledge, is a fundamental requirement of the discipline, and every scientific hypothesis is constantly scrutinized and contested anytime fresh information appears to call into question its applicability. An example of this includes the search for a cancer cure and a clean source of energy. Following the Industrial Revolution, the different paths taken by science and technology started to converge. After around 1850, when a chemical industry started to grow based on the use of information about chemistry and electrical technologies that emerged based on the knowledge about electromagnet, the idea of tying scientific achievements to technology for use in society then became widely accepted. Meanwhile, there are other examples of discoveries in the life sciences that reach far beyond the realm of science and have an impact on how people think in many facets of society. For instance, Charles Robert Darwin's theory of evolution, which was suggested in the 19th century, fundamentally altered people's sense of nature, feel of humanity, and sense of society. The lecture by Richard Feynman from 1959, that is entitled There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom, serves as the catalyst for the development of nanotechnology. Since then, measurement technology has advanced, and scientific breakthroughs like the discovery of fullerenes in 1984 by Harold Kroto and others have helped to advance the field. Formal education from primary through high school should emphasize more the ways in which science has influenced and improved human culture and well-being, while also emphasizing how science thrives when STS is free to use human reason to comprehend the world.
In real-life phenomena, science, technology, and society plays an important role in our daily life that we can't imagine our lives without technology. Numerous scientific and technological inventions save us from consuming time and money. Technology has provided us advanced way to treat diseases as cancer, and even way to pre-book a camp or train ticket. In today's world, the role of science and technology is indispensable. Science and technology generate new knowledge and which significantly contribute to the development and progress of people's lives, proved in such way that it helps us communicate with our friends and family conveniently. Nevertheless, STS still has benefit exceeding its downside. One of these is application in accounting, which started during Mesopotamia era. Back then, the barter system and the usage of an abacus were still relevant, whereas at this age, when accounting is already known, transactions are recorded in cuneiform writing from the 21st century and it proves that the usage of technology has a big impact on how accounting works today. And of course, how society adapts in technology behind the improvement of accounting. For instance, instead of an abacus, accountants shifted to the use of calculator in computing financial statements. In our current generation, accountants and accounting students use Microsoft Excel, which assists in recording, classifying, and summarizing transactions much easier than manual bookkeeping using pen and paper.
In this documentary, we have seen how biodiversity and the health of society are interrelated with each other, as well as how different factors such as climate change and human activities affect the state of biodiversity and the health of the citizens in the Philippines. We have also heard about GMOs and genetic engineering, as well as the conservation of wildlife. Furthermore, it was also discussed how science, technology, and society, or STS, as a course is deemed crucial for the intellectual development of the individuals in a society. And upon ending this episode, we are to leave one quote from George Bernard Shaw, which says that progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything.